guys, it's Tori, and today we are doing the long-awaited Gaskell ranking. I am going to be ranking all of her full-length novels, and I'm so excited to finally be able to do this. It's been such a long time coming, like I said. I mean, it's been a while since I finished Sylvia's Lovers, but also just like getting through all of Gaskell's novels. I've just been really excited to do this. I've done it with Hardy before, I've done it with Austen before, I've done it with the Brontes, of course, so if you haven't seen those, I will try my best to remember to link them down below, but they are on my channel, so you can go and check those out. But let's discuss Elizabeth Gaskell. So my history with Elizabeth Gaskell, I definitely got started reading her primarily because of Kate Howe and then others on BookTube who really enjoy Elizabeth Gaskell. Before that, I really hadn't ever heard of Elizabeth Gaskell before coming on BookTube and joining Booktober and all of that jazz. Although I did know about North and South because when I was younger, probably like middle school, I saw the miniseries adaptation of North and South and then learned that it was a book. But that was the extent of my experience. I hadn't read the book, I just knew it existed. I enjoyed the miniseries. I had friends who were a lot more interested in like Regency Victorian romances than I was. I've always enjoyed them, but I've never been like in love with them, and so that's kind of what I associated North and South with. So while I really enjoyed the miniseries and thought it was super cute, in fact, it's been since then that I've even watched it. I need to rewatch it. It just didn't grip my heart. And I've gotta say, Elizabeth Gaskell, I know for a lot of people, she's like one of their favorite Victorian authors. For me, at this point, I would say she's up there, but I probably would put several authors before her. Hardy, of course, the Brontes, at least Anne and Emily. Charlotte may be right around the same as Elizabeth Gaskell as far as overall oeuvre of books. Dickens at this point, possibly Anthony Trollope, I might put above her. So she's definitely not one I would be like, oh, she's my absolute favorite, but she is one I really enjoy. She is a very comforting, she's probably one of my favorite comforting Victorian authors. I would say her and probably Anthony Trollope is pretty comforting to me. I don't know. Anyway, so I really enjoy her. I wouldn't say she's a favorite Victorian author, but I really enjoy her, and really all of her books I have pretty positive feelings towards. There's not really any that I disliked. There's a couple that maybe I wasn't as interested in, but I still enjoyed myself. I love her writing. I think that's my favorite part about her, which is probably a good thing since she's a writer, but her writing style really is beautiful. I also really love how versatile her books are. Like, all of these books have very different tones and they're exploring a lot of similar themes but in different ways, and so I really love that about Gaskell, that she's very versatile and her writing is just gorgeous and very comforting to read. So let's get into this with the 6 main novels, starting at the bottom with, unfortunately, Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. I read this in 2022, I believe, and while I enjoyed it, it just didn't grip my heart. I know for a lot of people, they absolutely love this book, like it just is such a comforting and sweet read to them, and for whatever reason, this really didn't click for me. Unfortunately, I was kind of disappointed by it. Again, Gaskell's writing is comforting, and I do feel like this is one that it will depend on what stage of life I'm in, not even just like, obviously, so background on what this is about if you don't know, sorry. This book follows a town called Cranford that's primarily run by these old widowed and single ladies, and our narrator is a nameless individual who visits the town often. I think at the end actually she does get a name in one of the last chapters, but it really just ends up being a series of short stories in a way with the same narrator, and like there is a progression in time, but it is kind of just a bunch of short stories about these ladies in this town and the shenanigans they get up to, which, like I said, is so charming, but I just don't think I'm at a point in my life where this will mean as much to me. Not to say that I feel like I need to age a lot in order to get this. I don't necessarily think that. I think I just need to be in a different place in my life for this to really make an impact on me. So it's at the bottom, but I mean, like I said, I enjoy Gaskell's writing enough that none of these were difficult to get through necessarily, just maybe not my favorite as far as the storyline goes and characters. Next we have Mary Barton, which I know for a couple people this is one of their favorites. Like I said, Gaskell is just so versatile, and I think everybody's ranking is a little bit different because of that. But Mary Barton follows a young girl who's in in a industrial town, a factory town, and there's of course a lot of issues with that going on. And her father gets involved in a lot of like strikes and rebellion against the factory owners. And then Mary Barton has a couple of suitors, one who is a very wealthy man, a factory owner's son, and the other is her cousin, I believe, or just someone she's closer to in class. It's actually primarily a little bit more about her dad, about John Barton, and I think at one point it was supposed to be called John Barton, but she ended up changing it to Mary Barton, which was an interesting thing to learn, and I think there's value in going into this with that in mind and thinking about why the change. And to me, I feel like by the end of this, Mary represents a more hopeful outlook on the future, and I think there is a lot of value in that. It also, even though John maybe is on page a little bit more than Mary, Mary experiences the contention between the different sides a little bit more and the class issues. John does too, but he becomes very certain in his opinion, whereas Mary has to kind of grow a lot within that. So anyway, I did enjoy John Barton's story a lot. In fact, I think that part was really my favorite part of this, is seeing John and his flaws and seeing how that influences him and his family's lives. I did like Mary, although I did feel she was a little bit flat for me at times, but there were a couple things in this that I did enjoy. It just wasn't my favorite, especially compared to the others, so this is where it lies. In the fourth spot, we have Ruth, and this was actually the first Gaskell I read because it follows a fallen woman trope. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to give you all the backstory of how it happens or anything and what all is involved so that you can experience it along with the characters. But this one, I remember at the time not being particularly wowed by it, but I really love that trope. If you know me, you know that I love the fallen woman trope. It's very classic, and you know, a lot of people say obviously there's a lot of problematic aspects to it, but I'm always fascinated by how authors at this time explored such a topic. So anyway, I really love that trope to begin with, so that was just a shoo-in for this book. I also did really like Ruth as a character, and I liked that this book, it reminded me in some ways of Tess of the D'Urbervilles for obvious reasons, but this one just had like a brighter experience obviously than Tess, if you've read Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. I do prefer Tess of the D'Urbervilles over this. I think Hardy's writing in that is immaculate. I think this is definitely one of Gaskell's weaker writing experiences, and I love Tess as a character probably more than Ruth, but I like seeing, in comparison with each other, seeing Tess end up dealing with things and having things just go in a way that's much more tragic, but starting from a very similar point to Ruth. I would argue that they are different types of fallen women for sure. Their experiences are not the exact same, but I would say on the whole their emotions behind things and how things fall out are very similar. I just feel like Ruth, despite there being tragedy in this story, and by the end of this story there's also more hope and more of a consideration of the changeability of life, that it can be happy in one moment and sad in another. And so I really liked how this topic was explored by Gaskell, and like I said, I did enjoy this. It wasn't my favorite book of all time or anything, but I did enjoy myself with it. All right, now we're getting into top three, and I would say these three really are ones that I just really loved. The first one is Wives and Daughters, which I really like, and it was kind of hard deciding what would go second and third. So between this one and what I put in second place, it probably could change based on the day. I would say compared to my second place, this actually was probably a little bit better written. The character exploration was probably a bit more in depth in a way that I appreciated. It is longer, first of all, so there's that to recommend it as far as developing the characters and stuff, but also this was later in her career, so obviously Gaskell would have improved by then. This story follows Molly Gibson, who her father is raising her on his own. Her mother has passed away, and her father feels the need to marry again so that she can have a mother figure. So he marries this woman who has a daughter of her own, and things just kind of take off from there. Molly's just dealing with a stepmother, a stepsister, and they're very different from Molly, and then she's also dealing with unrequited love and other connections in the town. And it's a really charming, beautiful story. This is one I just fall into. This is probably one of the Gaskells I would call a comfort novel. Like, it's just cozy to snuggle up with and read this book. I also should mention, I have only read all of these once, so this is my ranking based on one read through of all of them. But that being said, I do remember just really loving this story. Molly Gibson is very charming. I also really like Cynthia, her stepsister. I think she's very interesting. The way life takes both of them is very interesting, how they just handle the world around them. That's very similar and yet very different at the same time. So great book. I understand why it's Kate Howe's favorite book of all time. It's really lovely, but it's not quite my favorite Gaskell. That being said, like I said, these top three are really ones that I just really, really love. Number two, which, like I said, probably could switch off with Wives and Daughters just depending on my mood a little bit, but that is Sylvia's Lovers. This is the last one I finished, so you will have heard my thoughts about this recently. This follows Sylvia, who is in a seaside town where a lot of the men go off and work on whaling ships. And at this time in history, I believe it's during the Napoleonic Wars, and they're dealing with the press gangs, which is basically where men from the Navy are able to go on shore and just take young men and force them into the Navy without like telling their families or anything, just take them away. So really heartbreaking stuff and really controversial, especially at the time, obviously, when it was happening. But this is a very atmospheric story. It's very gothic and stormy in nature and setting, and it's just beautiful. I really loved that aspect. It pulled me right in. This does have a lot of dialect, so it can be a bit hard to read at times because you don't really understand what people are saying very well and you have to think a little extra hard about it. I did listen to a good chunk of this on an audiobook and that seemed to help. But I just really found Sylvia to be a very interesting character. Like, I feel like she was kind of like some of the other characters, main female characters in Gaskell's novels, but way more well-rounded, and I just thought she was so fascinating. Philip, I did not like very much, but I also found him very fascinating. He's one of Sylvia's lovers that is very interested and dedicated to her, but is flawed as well. And I found it to be a very interesting story, the way it went. I did not like the ending. That's the one thing, and probably the only reason why I question whether this is above Wives and Daughters is because Wives and Daughters, I mean, it doesn't actually have the ending written, if you didn't know that. Wives and Daughters was not completed before Gaskell's death, but there was literally like a chapter or two left before it would have been finished, so you pretty much know where it's going, and Gaskell had a plan and told her editors / publishers what that plan was, and so we are able to basically understand where it was going. But I do feel like I'm more satisfied by all of that in Wives and Daughters than I am by the Sylvia's Lovers ending. In some ways I understand why it went that way, but it ended up feeling like a tragedy for the sake of being a tragedy, like it's trying to just make you sad instead of building on the themes that were already there. Like, I think there would have been better ways to get some of the themes and messages across that were in this story if it had ended a different way. So I was disappointed by the ending. I didn't really like it. There was an aspect about it, it kind of, in the very, very end, turns it into kind of like a legend story, a local legend kind of a thing, and I did like that it turned it into that, because I think there was a charm to that, especially in a seaside town where they have all these whaling excursions and, you know, all of the urban legends and stuff that go along with that. And so I did enjoy that aspect of the ending. If it was going to be the way it was, I'm glad that they added that extra little dash of a twist to it, but I wish it had ended a different way. I just really do. So a little bit mixed as far as that goes, but overall I just loved it. And like I said, the characters are so fascinating. Like, I'm just very, very fascinated by a lot of what happened in this book. It made me think a lot, and me being a psychology person, I feel like that this book really fed into that topic, which I just really, like I said, I really love. So yes, this is my second favorite Gaskell novel, and it is wonderful. If you haven't read it yet, you definitely should. And in my number one spot is one you probably will have guessed based on where we are, especially if you know Gaskell's novels pretty much at all, you know what's left, and that is North and South. I love this book so very much. This one I would say is probably one of my top favorite Victorian novels ever, if not like classic novels ever. I don't know if it would be in my top of all time necessarily if I were to do like a top 20 or something. I don't know if it would quite make it into that. Maybe, I don't know. And I think on reread, it will grow in my estimation. But for now, it is definitely my favorite Gaskell novel. I loved this. I loved Margaret Hale and all of her experiences. I loved the exploration of the criminal justice system in this. So Margaret Hale is our main character, and she moves with her parents from the south of England to the north of England, and her father's career also changes within that move. And so there's a lot of different dynamics of change and experiencing different worlds. And while she's in the north, which she does not like, she finds it gross, it's very industrial, and she does not like it. But while there, she meets John Thornton, who is one of the factory owners, and they kind of have a almost enemies to lovers sort of storyline. And it's just beautiful. Like I said, it deals with the criminal justice system through Margaret Hale's brother. I won't give you any more spoilers than that, but there's some really interesting things there. And I really enjoyed myself reading this. I feel like Gaskell, as I've said, is just has a very comforting writing style, and I definitely felt that coming through very strongly in this book. I also found the characters very interesting to unpack and learn about, and the plot interesting. So this just really had the whole Gaskell package, which is why it's number one. It just had everything I would have wanted it to. I can't even think about anything that I didn't like about it. Like, it was all just amazing. And I really need to reread it because it's been a couple years, and I honestly feel like I don't remember enough and would love to just get back into it because, like I said, I just adored it. I also would like a new copy because this is a very flimsy edition. It's nice because it is a ecologically friendly type book. It's made out of recycled paper, which is great, but I do really want a prettier copy of it. So at some point I think I will do that. One that has more notes and stuff I think would be great. But for now, I have this one. I really love this book. Glad I read it. Glad I finished Gaskell's novels, and that is my ranking for Elizabeth Gaskell. Luckily, I still have plenty of short stories and novellas by her to read, as well as The Life of Charlotte Bronte, the biography of Charlotte Bronte that Gaskell wrote after Charlotte's death. So I have a lot to get through, but I am done with her full-length novels, which is crazy and wonderful, and yeah, I'm just so glad I was able to get through them, and I look forward to rereading them in the future and seeing how my ranking and thoughts change, because I'm sure it will. I'm very sure it will. Let me know down below your favorite Gaskell novel, as I would love to. Also, if you have any comments on any of my thoughts on these that you disagree with or anything, I would love to hear that and why. I never say this, but be sure to like the video if you liked it, comment, and subscribe as well. I love talking about books and would love to have you around to chat with me, give me recommendations. It's just wonderful. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!